Welcome back, my friends, to another TFT hyperroll roundup video where I'm going to go through lots and lots of builds for you. But before I get into the meat of this, let me just say subscribe if you like this content. As a lot of you may know, I gave up another channel that had a lot of subscribers on it to come over here and start fresh. I'll tell the story one day. It's really not that big a deal. But whether you're from the old channel or new, subscribe, comment, do all the stuff to help the YouTube algorithm so the video can get out there and be seen by lots of people. This channel exists to help people get up to hyper tier, and we've had a lot of success in the past. And remember, the builds in this video are for hyperroll. Now, I've had some people ask me in the past why they can't use the regular ranked structure for hyperroll, and a lot of it has to come down to probabilities and also the fact that in hyperroll, you are much more likely to get up to 9 champions, and that's going to dramatically change how you're going to ultimately build. Some of the builds I'm going to show you are not very easy to reach and ranked, and because they're weak early, you're not getting up to 9 most likely. I also want to distinguish between builds that you can kind of fall back on versus builds that you jump on when you get a chance. And let's start this one straight off the top with builds that you jump on if you get a chance. If you get something like a Cannoneer heart, go ahead and pick it up, because there's a really good chance you're going to be able to work into our first build, which is going to be Darkflight. So they said they nerfed this a little bit in this latest patch, but it really doesn't feel that way. It went down a smidge, but if you can get to 4 or 6 Cannoneers, you're still going to do pretty well with this build. Now, I call this build Darkflight, but I really should call it Darkflight Cannoneers because there are only 4 Darkflight champions. That is Rel, Aphelios, Swain, and rengar, and there's really no synergy between them. So you're going to be creating your synergy off of your other champions. And in this case, I find it best to go with Cannoneer as your main trait, and then allow the Darkflight to build off of it. The way Darkflight works, of course, is you have a sacrificial champion who is going to go onto that little sacrificial hex you see form. That champion will then disappear. All of the Darkflight champions will get bonus health and then a copy of the item that was sacrificed. Now, other videos on this subject usually use Sejuani as their sacrifice champion. I am not a fan of that strategy. I sacrifice Senna, sorry Lucian, but it just works better this way. Sejuani works as a great tank to hold things back, and your goal with this build is to hold back the other team as much as possible while your backline, which is going to be made up of Cannoneers, takes things out. Senna doesn't do enough damage to me to keep her in place, but Sejuani will soak up enough damage to justify her being there. As you fill out your Cannoneers in the backline, it will make more and more and more sense. It is difficult to win early because you are losing a player, so expect to lose early, but it does all turn around at one point, and I'll show you. First, the item you're making is Zeke's Herald, and once you have your 3 Darkflights, you place 2 of them around Aphelios. This is going to give Aphelios incredibly increased attack speed. Then you want to add additional attack speed items onto Aphelios. If you can get a Rage Blade, that's great. Static Shiv is also good because that will do additional damage to the team against you. I use Cavaliers in this build a lot just to keep the front line tanky. I keep Sejuani in because she will increase the health of the entire team due to her guild bonus, which will help with the additional Darkflight. Once you bring in Swain, he will take you up to 6, which will be giving a significant bonus to your team. I will generally keep Swain out of the match until I get to stage 9, and that's because I'm going to use him as a second surround to Graves. Graves is your final Cannoneer. If you happen to get lucky, as I did in this particular match, and get an emblem, I put it on rengar, then you can get up to the 6 Cannoneer, which is a huge bonus and will allow you to win a lot easier, obviously. Your final board will end up looking like this: Sejuani out front to absorb damage, Swain and Rel on either side of Graves, and Rengar and Rel on either side of Aphelios. That will speed up Graves and Aphelios to the maximum possible. It'll allow Swain to come in and just be a giant damage absorbing tank as well, and it will reliably get you into the top 4. Now, of course, you're going to want to change things up depending on items. If you get really good Rengar items or really good Swain items, like in this case I got the Radiant Hextech Gunblade, you want to make use of those. I'm always going to have Aphelios double surrounded so that he picks up as much attack speed as possible, but with the right item, Swain can just hold the entire team hostage. You can see it right here that even though it looks like I'm going down at first, Swain is going to just keep holding on, sucking health out, and allowing me to win. If you get a chance to make Swain a Cavalier, I highly encourage you to give it a try. It's really fun because he gets the extra armor and magic resist from Cavalier. He is absorbing damage whenever he ults, and of course he'll just be holding things in place for Aphelios to ultimately destroy. The key things to remember is to use Senna as your sacrificial champion with a Zeke's Herald so that everyone's attack is being sped up. As with just about all builds in this guide, I do not suggest trying to force what I'm about to show you. Look for a sign from the TFT gods that it wants you to go in this particular direction. In this case, I really like to look for NPCs like Silas as a key to go Whispers. I've covered Whispers previously in a video and not much has changed, but the real challenge with it is getting from point A to B, because you only have 2 Whispers champions in the early levels, and that's Silas and our crazy plant lady. For her, you want AP items like Blue Buff and Rabadon's Death Cap. For Siphon, the dragon you're going to get later, you want AD items, Bloodthirster, and Titan's Resolve. So you need to find item holders to hold those items. Your tank items will go onto Silas, but this often leaves you with a big, large gap in between the beginning and the end of a match. I often like to fill in with bruisers since Siphon is a bruiser, so when you find your bruisers, you can add them in and that will help fill out your build as you're waiting to get your higher level champions. There are only 5 champions in this build I consider essential, and that's Siphon, Silas, Pantheon, Crazy Plant Lady, and Seraphine. Seraphine will tick the Evoker trait, so that will help in terms of casting. After that, fill in what the game gives you. Your 6 Whispers, along with Siphon counting as 3, will do a ton of damage and keep everything under control. You're almost guaranteed top 4 if you can get there. The problem is that you don't always start strong. That's why I say to look for a Silas before committing into this. Now I want to talk about some builds that are a little more general. And I'm calling them general not because you should force them, but because they are more forceable. Dragonmancer Tempest is a pretty good example of this. The reason I say it's forceable is because a lot of your champions that you need are low-level champions. So, for example, you have Set and Karma, who are Dragonmancers, and you have Kiana and Ezreal, who are Tempest. So you can essentially get to 2 Dragonmancers and 2 Tempests with 1s and 2s instead of waiting until 3s and 4s, etc. as you go. They make an incredibly powerful combination because the stun from Tempest will hold up a team, and your Dragonmancers can get unreasonably strong, as you've seen in previous videos. It's not always guaranteed to win, and you can see from this one, even though I started with 2 3 costs and a 2 cost, I very quickly get myself surrounded and get knocked down. But if you stick with it, it can work out. Virtually any of the Dragonmancer champions can be your carry. They all require different items. For Lee Sin, it's this combination of Infinity Edge, Jeweled Gauntlet, and Hand of Justice. That way he's doing a ton of damage with his kicks, and then also healing a little bit with the Hand of Justice. If you go with Volley Bear, although I don't find him the most effective, you're going to want attack speed items such as Rage Blade, and then Static Shiv tends to work really well along with his ult. For Kaisa or Karma, you're going to go with AP heavy items, things like Blue Buff, Rabadon's Death Cap, etc. That will make them really strong. I haven't really seen an effective set build that will really carry until the end, as he does tend to fall off. And if you end up with a 2-star Yasuo, I like to use items like Rapid Fire Cannon, Death Blade, and then pretty much whatever else you have left over. In this case, he was just playing second support. I had a Dragonmancer additional, but he was getting 50% of the bonus. And this will ultimately talk about the big giant frozen elephant in the room that was dominating for a while and everyone thinks is nerfed, but no, it's not. So this was recorded after the nerfs, and as you can see, there's only 20% additional damage. This is the nerfs. And this is a round from the match where you can see the effectiveness of the nerfs. Now, I think what it did accomplish is not as many people are going for Dragonmancer Nunu, so it's a lot easier to get a 3-star, and when you do get a 3-star, throw a Warmogs on and then a healing item, that Nunu is just going to continue to do what old Nunu used to do, and that is eat absolutely everything in sight with a ridiculous amount of damage. Look at it. And of course, Dragonmancer Nunu is not something you can force. You're going to have to get lucky and get a Dragonmancer emblem to use, and then, like I say, something like a Warmogs and a healing item. You also are going to need to have a thick skin, because you are going to get yelled at by the opposing players, kind of whether you like it or not. Because when your Nunu gobbles up their entire team with, again, just a nonsensically ridiculous amount of damage, you become a scumbag Nunu player, even though it was nerfed. So just if you want to deal with that, yeah, Dragonmancer Nunu does still work. The next build I would like to show you is also another one that's fairly simple to get into, because it starts with mostly 1s and 2s, and that is the Guild Cavalier build. Now, you're going to start with Twitch and Sejuani as your main points, and then bring in Ezreal to add in Swift Shot, and then whatever Cavaliers you're going to bring in to help tank up the front line. Your main goal with this build is to stay strong for as long as possible until you can get Zippy, and then kind of decide what to do with Zippy. Sometimes you can build Zippy as a pure tank and count on champions like Jace and Twitch and Ezreal, or if you bring in Xayah, that's always a good move to do most of your damage, or you can turn Zippy into a damage machine, hoping to destroy their back line. Either one is equally as valid. You have to go by your items and your augments to decide which way to go. Ultimately, there are so many different ways to build this up as to how you make your Zippy and who you use for your damage. It really is going to come down to your augments and what you feel is working at the time. But when you follow that guild trait, I find it almost always leads you into a top 4 scenario. I often find it better to bring in Soraka as your final champion instead of Bard, because the healing is more important than that small amount you get from the guild buff. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this next build because I just did a whole trilogy of videos about it, but Lagoon is similarly one of those traits that is easy to run from the beginning because it starts with a lot of 1 and 2s, and once you get to 3, you start getting your rewards. This is an incredibly powerful build that you'll want to have in your repertoire. The key is making blue buffs, Hextech Gunblades, Rabadon Deathcaps, getting them onto Swain when it matters, using Silas as your main tank, and you will almost always be able to get into the top 4 with it. Make sure to put some AD items aside and put them onto Nyla. She can tear teams apart, and although they've recently buffed Zeri, it's not going to be necessarily as strong as Nyla in terms of doing damage. So if you have to trade one for the other, definitely keep Nyla. As you can see, especially at the 3-star gold level, she will eliminate teams very quickly. But this is a very popular build, so there will be some competition for it, but it is one you can kind of, quote, force if you need to, because it's easy to get into from the beginning. Our final build is one that is fairly easy to, and I put in quotes, force, and it is Astral Mage. And the reason it's easy to force is because your 3 starting Astrals, Skarner, Vladimir, Nidalee, are all 1 costs, and you can often easily get Lux in the first round as well, so you can start off with 2 mages. Your real goal with this build is to ultimately build a mage hat. I like to use Varus as my item holder for Aurelian Soul, but what you want to do is create Astral and mages, preferably 8 Astral, 5 mages if you can pull it off, with a mage hat on Aurelian Soul. That will pretty much guarantee you getting into the top 4 if you can pull it off. Now, if you don't get the mage hat, it can still work because Aurelian Soul is pretty strong, and you'll likely have a lot of gold Astral champions. The problem with this build is that it's fairly competitive, and if you don't get Aurelian Soul, yeah, you're kinda done for at that point. Once you get Aurelian Soul into the match, my goal is to get a blue buff, the mage hat, and then a Hextech Gunblade onto Aurelian Soul, but it doesn't always work out that way. 2 Hextech Gunblades will do. As you will see, it brings your team back to full health very quickly. And even against the dreaded Lagoon Menace, with those huge bombs going off twice, you can stay in a match and finish them off. And sometimes it is the Hextech Gunblade that is being persnickety. In this particular case, I decided to keep Soraka in the match to heal instead of going to the 5 mage, and the reason was because I had the Rabadon's Deathcap on Aurelian Soul, who is the one I am counting on being my huge damage dealer. As you can see, those orbs of death are doing exactly what they need to do to get me solidly into the top 4 of this match. For some other items in this build, I like to get a static Shiv onto Nidalee because that will lower the magic resist of the opposing team, so that when your orbs of death hit, they're going to do more damage. For Varus, a Rageblade is an excellent item, and then you can stack some more AP items onto Lux just so she can do more casting. This list is the builds that I find most useful in climbing. A lot of the other combos I have tried just are not reliable in getting you into the top 4. And remember, that's really your goal here. While winning is great, I have yet to find a absolutely reliable combo that will win consistently. So look at your augments, look at your items, and then decide which one of these comps you want to go for, because your ultimate goal is to make your way into the top 4 so that you can keep climbing. And these are the builds that I've found will do it as consistently as possible. And I'll be doing some videos in the not too distant future that go into some of these that I've covered here in more detail, and also some one-off builds that I've found work but are not necessarily as reliable as the ones I've presented here, so I don't recommend looking to do them. And you're going to have matches that come down like this, where it is Dragonmancer Nunu versus Dragonmancer Nunu, because despite the nerfs, it still works really well. I don't know if they're going to try to nerf it more or what they're going to do, but Dragonmancer's really popular. Use it if you want to. People may hate you for it, but go for it. It'll help you win. Hope you enjoyed this video and have an absolutely awesome day.